to satisfy that urge. Pick your nation, pick your league, pick your players, and yell at them when they do poorly. You can find it in the links below or by searching for Wicket Cricket Manager in your app store today. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. Cricket is about partnerships, and this video was made in partnership with HLCTech. Yeah, the company you see in the Australian shirts. Supercharge your technology with them today. Morning everyone, welcome to the Scoreboard. And what do we have today? Australia are still in the World Cup. Well, who would have thought about that? And Sri Lanka, who were already kind of not in the World Cup, further from the World Cup. What a bizarre start to this game. Because at what stage was Australia pretty much thinking about the future? And about 15, 20 overs in, and then it absolutely went the other way, to the point where Australia ended up with a net run rate victory in what looks like should have been a 300 to 350 first innings score by Sri Lanka. Just a remarkably weird set of events that actually ended up here. Not the kind of game that we thought it was going to be. Well, certainly not the kind of game that Sri Lanka had teased to begin with. But let's start with that collapse, because why not? It was as dramatic as you get. We'll talk a little bit later about the specifics of Kusal Pereira and everyone, and Nasanka, who played very, very well. But this is a dramatic little graphic, isn't it? No wickets for the first 125 runs. And even the second partnership, I mean, it's not great or anything, but there was something there. And then the rest of the game, it is just absolutely brutal. And I think now that we've seen quite a few collapses, we had the Pakistan collapse. What was the collapse that happened yesterday? Another collapse yesterday. I feel like I'm missing a collapse here. And I think it was, I'm trying to think who it was. Oh, Aaron Finch was on the commentary at one stage, on the BBC commentary, and he was talking about the fact that this hasn't been a batting pitch. And it's interesting because most of the comments I've had from fans have been talking about how these have been batting wickets. The players aren't talking about it that way at all. And we've seen so many times when teams have looked very good and things have gone apart. Perhaps this is the lack of ODI cricket. Not that Kusal Pereira's played a lot of ODI cricket, but perhaps it's, the lack of ODI cricket and everything else. But I do think there is something specifically in these wickets. And one thing that we saw, we can focus on the Sri Lanka side of the collapse, of course, because that's the fun side. But also on the Australian side, when you looked at the CricViz stats, I think they actually said that there was a good percentage of chances that the Australian team had been creating. And so what's the difference? Well, they took some of the chances. They probably, I think, came up with slightly better strategies and stuck with them for a little bit longer. So there was a lot going on there. But very important. Huge apologies for this. We are as, if not more, frustrated by this than anyone else is, of course, at the moment. Let me just get back to the graphic. Try it again. And it's working now, I'm being told. So, Pat Cummins, I think this is huge for Australia, that he managed to take wickets. I also like the fact that they went with a short ball. I know it wasn't Stoinis who got the breakthrough, but, he was one who hit Pereira on the helmet. I like the way they went about that part of their innings. But it's also worth saying that, Zampa was just awful. And I think he might have said that he had back spasms or there was a back issue. I saw a tweet online that said something along the lines of, after 3 overs, it looked like his career was over, and he's ended up with 4 wickets. Just bizarre, the turnaround here. But Sri Lanka played a big part in this. This is more the kind of batting performance that perhaps we thought we would see from Sri Lanka in this tournament. And yet, for the first 100, 115 overs, they were in the tournament, they were magnificent. A huge turnaround from that point of view. So Australia didn't stuff up all the different chances that they had as well. Glenn Maxwell continued to be absolutely brilliant. I love the idea that we were a bit worried he might have to be a frontline bowler, and now we're worried he might have to carry the entire attack at all times. But yeah, just absolutely what Australia needed to come back from that position. I do think their bowling was just that little bit more attacking today. I know the CricViz stats maybe don't quite back that up. CricViz says that they've been creating a lot of chances and dropping them. I think that's also true, but I do think a lot of those chances were also perhaps later in the game. If you look at when they were creating chances, I thought they had been bowling a little bit more defensive. Even at the start today, a little bit at times, I just thought they weren't pushing perhaps quite as hard as they could have. And then when they started to do that, they looked like a completely different team. And that pressure on Sri Lanka completely changed everything, right? So brilliant, from Australia in that point of view. There's not much to say about the chase, because obviously the chase was not particularly high. But I just want to point out at the moment that, and I would say I've got more messages from people, Australian fans, about Marnus Labuschagne than even as they were losing, and Marnus wasn't actually the reason they were losing. The catches and all the wickets falling was the reason that they were losing. People were just absolutely obsessed with Marnus Labuschagne being in this team, and I do understand it. Weirdly enough, today when I saw they had that small chase, I thought that was a good chance for him. Get himself to about 20 or 30 from 35 balls, and then kick on at the end and get the net run rate. But again, he managed not to do that. And so at the moment, he has the lowest strike rate of anyone in this World Cup so far. And, we've got, you can see here, there's quite a few players who haven't got massively, great strike rates in the World Cup so far. You've got Mahedi Hassan, KL Rahul, Virat Kohli, plenty of guys have gone slow. Marnus is significantly slower, and partly it is to do with the fact that Australia has been losing wickets, but he does really look unable to rotate the spinners, and he doesn't have great four options against the spinners at the moment. We know he's played spin very well when he's when he's been in Australia, and occasionally he's been playing outside of Australia but not in Asia. But inside of Asia specifically, doesn't really seem to have that ability to go completely nuts against them. But very good for Australia. You look at what they did today, the ability of, Mitchell Marsh knocking the head off that, the top of that chase. We'll go to some of the issues that they have, of course, with their batting in a little while. And Maxwell and Stoinis at the end, ensuring that they got the net run rate. That was very important. The points are the most important thing. Yeah, I had been talking to some people, in the media and inside the camp and around the camp, or different Australian people when the two losses happened, and there was a lot of should we change everything sort of talk. And I did say that this was a game they just should have won, and perhaps it needed to get to the point where Sri Lanka had done so well in this particular game that everything started to click into place for Australia. But this was a game I just thought they were going to win anyway. The next game is really interesting, and then the game after that is Netherlands. So they've got Pakistan and then Netherlands. And I said on the power list that I thought they were a very good chance of being 3-2. I feel slightly more confident with that today, even if they did balls up the start of this game. Kusa Pereira, talking about the start of this game, he's such a bizarre cricketer, because I think we know that Kusal Pereira at his absolute best is, just otherworldly. And yet we have seen it so rarely. And I'm trying to think of a really good comp for him. Carlisle Best might be the sort of player that you would comp him with. Again, someone who's very good in World Cups. But in 2019, he had a pretty solid World Cup. He went 273 runs, averaging 39, a strike rate of 111. If you remember back to Kusal Pereira in that World Cup, Sri Lanka were really, really aggressive at the top. It was part of their plan. He was the perfect person for that. And you can see up until 2021, although he doesn't play a lot of games, lots of starts and a couple of big scores, and then he just disappears from the side. And this is a pretty common thing with Sri Lankan cricket. They don't seem to be able to keep that. Well, there's two things that either happen in Sri Lankan cricket. You seem to have players who stick around forever despite the fact they never make any runs, or players with actual talent sort of just seem to disappear and then come back. He's too good a player not to make this work. And I know there's a pattern. I think Mark Machado and Estelle have talked about this before, maybe on Murali End or on the old Sri Lanka on 99.94 podcast. There does seem to be a bit of a pattern where Sri Lanka will keep a player around, knowing that they're talented, and then they seem to disappear around that 27 to 30 age mark. And then when they hit peak batting maturity, they come back, and then they're almost at the end of that upwards curve. It almost never seems to work. I'm hoping that Kusal Pereira isn't going to be a similar player when it comes to that sort of stuff. But he looked incredible today. Outside of the knock on the head, which was from the hook shot, it looked very good. Australia went with the short ball. That was clearly their tactic. I'm completely on board with that. I think it's a very clever thing for them to do. Won't work against every team, won't work against every batter, but certainly played a big part of it today. But just glad that Kusal Pereira could come back, and glad he could bat on and didn't show any signs of concussion, because it was quite a knock, wasn't it? You know, hit his head, bounced back down the wicket, prop up, full frontal knock to there. I'm not sure full frontal's the word I should be using, but you know what I mean. Nisanka's innings as well. I mean, you know, when it comes to Sri Lanka, we can only really talk about the two openers. But he's been someone who's been making runs for a while. I just want to see, was he back on this one? Was he on slower strike rates? Yeah. So he's what's his strike rate going to be there? Probably around 80-ish. And I think we've seen with him before, he has a bit of a glass ceiling with his batting. He can play attacking shots. It was the T20 World Cup in Australia when he struck the ball really well, but you still quite often look at his strike rates and they don't go up. So whether he's hitting boundaries or not hitting boundaries, he does have a bit of a problem. But him and Sri Lanka have really at least allowed Sri Lanka to probably go beyond that sort of Afghanistan issue where there was a period where they didn't have very exciting players with Sri Lanka, when it comes to strike rate and everything else. But they also just didn't have anyone making any runs. And I think what Sri Lanka and Nisanka have allowed them to do is at least know that there is a par score there. Yes, of course, if they had, the full bowling lineup of Chamira and Hasaranga, maybe today's score is still too low. They still ended up with a few wickets there. But I do think, as someone who is still developing his game, Nisanka is certainly a ODI player. Needs to get that little bit quicker, to be at that, Rizwan, Virat Kohli type strike rotation kind of level. But he's definitely given Sri Lanka that consistency of runs. And it's a huge thing. It's a really, really important thing, in the team today. Again, we've seen them collapse now, 2 of their last 4 important games. Having these anchor types and that ability to be able to do that is very, very important to this side. Kusal Mendes, of course, failed today, which is, I don't want to say a shock, but certainly, annoying, I would say, if nothing else. And we've got Australia against left-arm seam in the power play since 2019. So traditionally, this was always a problem for England. And you can see that while Bairstow's still having an issue with it, not having Bairstow open as much hasn't been a problem. Jason Roy not as bad as well. England's batting lineup has changed around a little bit. So some of those players. So now Australia is the team. And also, shout-outs to Bangladesh. That's quite epic. And Madhushanka got the 2 early wickets, which is probably the only time outside of that opening partnerships where Sri Lanka had any real hope there. But Mitch Marsh obviously does like seam a lot more than everything else. But Madhushanka, had he picked up even one more wicket, would have put a lot of pressure on Australia at that point. Again, we see that what we had, even when they've won, there's still some jitters within that batting lineup. And my biggest issue is it is the combination of they seem to be weak against seam at times, and certainly against left-arm seam, and then also weak against spin at times, Australia. So even if they get to 3-2, let's say I do my power rankings at that point, today, there's absolutely no doubt that they've given themselves a chance. They've kept themselves in the tournament, but there's a long way to go. But one thing this does show, which is why we do the power lists, is that your form can be very dependent on just the teams you play. Australia had played India and South Africa. If not the best two teams, then certainly two of the best three teams in this tournament. And you look very, very different. And Pakistan's a perfect example of this. You know, Pakistan played the Netherlands, and then they played Sri Lanka, right? So they played probably the top end of the bottom tier, and then, you know, the lower end of the bottom tier. And they had some shaky moments in both of those games as well. Then they play India, it suddenly does look like a different kettle of fish. So there is a big difference, I think, between those sides. And Australia, again, they weren't confident at the start of this game. It took a while for them to get into it. But then after a while, they started to realize we're a better team than Sri Lanka. You know, they stuck with their plans at times. Zampa overcame it. And he deserves credit for this, because we have seen, you know, Shadab at times completely lose it, and Zampa was not anywhere near that. Well, he was near losing it, but he wasn't anywhere near that by the end of the game. And, you know, very, very important. But that's it for the tape. We will have a short break here, and then after the break, any questions that you have. So super chats, even normal comments, everything else. We'll probably have a slightly shorter show here, just because we've already lost sound once. Also, I'm in a lobby. I've got ostriches on my left and some sort of South African beast. One of those springbocky type things. It's not a springbok, though. I need my sons here. They're much better with those kinds of animals than I am. Thank you so much for being on the scoreboard. Muku's going to play an ad. After the ad, we'll get to your questions in the room. This video was made with support by HLCTech, a company that believes in partnership so much you can read their names on the Australian shirts. This show leans in hard on data and technology, so we're proud to work with HLCTech, leaders in the field. Picture this, you made a video and now you want the world to see it in their favorite social media platform. You could bowl into the wind by slaving away making edits, or you could let Memento effortlessly cut those epic moments down, making them perfect for your social media followers. It's like having a runner. You play the shot and they do all the hard work. Sync up your podcast and YouTube and they will be the substitute fielder who does all of the work. With Memento, you can craft a long innings down to the best highlights. Make your content, but let Memento cut it. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. Welcome back to the scorecard. All right, let's get through some chats. There's a couple of super chats in there, but some regular chats. But if you're in the room now, I won't go too long today because I am terrified that some child's going to come up and throw a slushie on me or something, or that the ostriches will attack me out there. Apologies for the internet and the microphone issues. We are sorting them out. There's something with my computer. It's a brand new computer, of course. Spent an absolute fortune on it. And it's not working. It's working worse than the computer I had before that was dying. So we know of these issues, but as you'll be aware if you've been watching the scoreboard, occasionally everything works perfectly. So it's very hard for us to isolate the problems when it is that infrequent. It's a bit like the Australian batting lineup. You know, there's so many different issues going on at the one time. It does become just a little bit squishy. But we will crack on. Let's just have a look. We got Vamasabi says, who are some of your favorite cricket commentators? Which ones do you detect? I think he means detest. Maybe he means detect. I think Shane Watson's incredible. I remember during, was it 2021 World Cup? I think he might have been the first time I heard him commentate regularly. And it was him and Dale Steyn. I was really excited to hear Dale Steyn. Dale Steyn was fine. There wasn't anything, particularly special about his commentary at all. Watto was just brilliant. And, Aaron Finch has done really, really good. And sometimes even I get confused between their voices. But there's a big difference in the amount of knowledge that Shane Watson manages to pass on. So in this World Cup, I love Simon Dewell. I think Simon Dewell's a perfect example of what happens when you are a professional commentator and you spend so much of your time perfecting your craft. I mean, this isn't saying off Simon Dewell. I think I've commentated with him once. We're not particularly close or anything, other than a couple of tweets and, occasionally working together. But Simon Dewell wasn't a particularly good commentator when he started. He was fine. He's gone to another level. Bish is another one that you can just tell they've done a lot of the work. And someone was asking me about commentary recently, and as someone who's done it a lot, I would still say that I'm a part-time commentator. And yes, I do, SEN and a lot for TalkSport, but I might commentate for 2 months of the year. And so it takes me a while to get back into it. You kind of forget what you do well. Someone starts commentating beside you in a different pattern and you start following them. It's a really, really tough job. And, you look at what the NFL commentators do. They're so professional, and the amount of analysis they do beforehand, the amount of work they do talking to players and coaches to make sure they get their information right. Cricket hasn't got to that level. It's amateur commentators, semi-professional commentators coming into quite often what is a very amateur thing. A lot of them are picked because they're former players. They don't think they have to do the work. It's a real shame. Cricket commentary should be so much better than it is. I won't get into all the different reasons why it is the case, but the majority of the problems are a lack of editorial control because the people who are hiring the commentators just want famous players. Oh, there's the thumbs come back. And then the other thing that I think is a really, really big issue is just that these people don't do these jobs enough. And it is not an easy job to be good at. It's an easy job to do if you're a former player. Or even if you're a journalist, or you're a decent broadcaster. It's not an easy job to do well in those situations. Thank you very much there. Ashish with the super chat. Thank you, Ashish. Thank you with the super chat. Maxwell Chinnaswabi versus Shadab and Nawaz could do some bad things. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting moment because you're going to have Zampa, Stoinis bowling bounces, maybe a little bit Pat Cummins, Stark will bowl a little bit in the middle again as well. And then on the other side, you've got Harris Ralph. You've got Nawaz, who will clearly bowl something. Probably not the ideal wicket for him. And then Shadab. I mean, Shadab, I'm not sure it matters that much about the pitch at the moment because Shadab's biggest problem is length. So it's either bowling half trackers or bowling full tosses. But yeah, I'd love to. This is probably going to be Max's last 50 over World Cup. I'd say definitely going to be his last 50 over World Cup. Love to see him have that one big, ridiculous moment. Also, Shadab, if he has to go up against Warner. I think I had Pakistan higher in the powered list because I felt uncomfortable. I already had Sri Lanka really high and they hadn't won a game. And I felt uncomfortable about also having Australia high when they hadn't won a game. Did I end up with Australia ahead of England? I think I did. I do think at the moment, having watched, all these sides, that perhaps Australia is still better than Pakistan, even though Pakistan has the 2 wins. But it'd be fascinating because there are parts of Pakistan's cricket I really like. I really like that sort of, Shafiq, Saud Shakil, Rizwan, Baba group. And you look at Australia's group in that same area, and it's not as strong. But there are other things that Australia does have. Fascinating how that game will go. Kind of a knockout now. I think when I wasn't quite a knockout before, but I'm starting to think of it more and more in that way. Then we've got Natesh, who says, "I know you're a big DDS fan." But I don't think he fits in really well with the Sri Lanka and white ball teams with his batting. No, I think I've said for a while he's bowling he's doing really, really well, but his batting is not quite at that level. He in T20 cricket you can kind of use him as an opener, but they've never really wanted to do that. He's probably more of an insurance batter, which is not particularly ideal, and I definitely understand that. But yeah, I could see why that's not going to work perfectly for them in that way. I'll take a quick break. If anyone else has any other questions, I can get to those. Just 1 second. Have you ever wondered how I watch so much cricket? I use VPNs to log into accounts from all around the world. But because before, even simple things like when something exciting would happen in a match, I would rush over to social media, and when I got there, the clips would say something along the lines of, "This video is not available in your area." In fact, most of the coolest cricket stuff in the world at the moment is geo-blocked because some random board didn't sign a deal where you happen to live. If you're a hardcore cricket nerd, the only way is to have a VPN, and we suggest Surfshark. They will give you the speed of your favorite quick bowler. They're as inventive as a T20 batter after a bunch of dot balls, and they're as secure as a specialist wicketkeeper with the softest hands in the world. And guess what? The kind folks at Surfshark are going to give you a deal. Enter the promo code Kimber for an extra 3 months free at surfshark.deals/Kimber. There are probably other things that Surfshark can help you with, like data and identity theft and traceability and intrusive advertising. But for us, it is our best weapon against the evil cricket geoblock. Go to Surfshark and type my name in KIMBER and get 3 months free today.
All right, welcome back. Sorry if the microphone's playing up again. It's a brand new cord as well. I feel like this computer just doesn't actually want us to work at all. But I'll get through the rest of the questions and then we'll do that. So we did the test, didn't we? Anyone else wants a super chat, of course, feel free. Sri says, the Sri Lanka team confidence is low after the 50 all out in the Asia Cup final. I don't know how much you've been following Sri Lanka, but they were absolutely terrible for 2 years. And they've just scored over 300 a couple of times there, Sri. So I don't think the Asia Cup final was the issue. They were very good, and I've been saying this for a long time, they're very good against those teams that are slightly worse than them. And, you know, there's certainly a bit of an issue when it comes to when they have to play the better team.